Well, I just sort of take an à la carte menu of examples of deep doubt, expressions of the open predicament that anthropologists like Robin Horton talk about, where you have to suspend judgment. You can't be certain about anything. As a poet, Meredith, which I've quoted before, but um, that was one of my favorite lines when I was an undergraduate. Ah, what a dusty answer gets the soul when hot for certainties in this our life. So when you search for certainties, which people seem to need, when you search for them, you don't get a clear answer. So to take a few examples of that, one is a philosopher who you know much more about than I do, and I don't really understand, but I know enough to know that David Hume, his whole philosophical basis is based on the idea that there is no certainty, that there are no inner foundational principles in the world that we learn through experience and through sensing the world. But it is ultimately, he's an extreme relativist. It is, of course, fascinating, and I think we may have talked about it, that he should be so. And recently we've been looking at this and seeing that it may indeed be strongly influenced by Chinese thought, that he wrote his great treatise on human understanding in the 2 years he was in a Jesuit monastery in France, which was very much associated with missionary work and had brought back a great deal of Buddhist and Confucian thought into this monastery and its library. And he talked to some of the monks who had been missionaries. So he may, in fact, be a proto-Taoist Buddhist. But for whatever reason, Hume is a man of the open predicament.
Yeah.
The next on my list is jumping a long way, basically Heisenberg. Heisenberg is a German or Scandinavian physicist in the early part of the 20th century, and his famous uncertainty principle had a devastating effect on physics, because what he famously said was that you cannot conduct experiments with absolute certainty. However careful you are, the experiment will always be, in a way, warped by the observer, that you cannot separate the objective and the subjective side of life. And so ultimately the truths of physics are uncertain. Now, that uncertainty principle, starting in physics, spills out into sciences and philosophy, and then into anthropology and all of life. So that's one other expression of that doubt. And it's obviously clearly related to just about a parallel development, which is quantum theory in physics. Because, as we've discussed before, quantum theory is an extreme example of the breakdown of, at the micro level, of the relationship between truth and untruth, because it claims that at the nano level, the two merge together, that nothing, you cannot say this is a dead cat or a living cat. It could be at one moment one and one moment the other. And so you have in quantum theory another expression of the revolution which so upset Einstein, uncertainty at the deepest level of science. Leaping back a couple of generations, you have in mathematics quite a good Oxford mathematicians, called Dodgson, decided to write some children's stories. And so he wrote a mathematical treatise and called it Alice in Wonderland, or Alice Through the Looking Glass. And what those two books are doing are playing about with the same problem of mathematical uncertainties. One of the famous expressions of it, of course, is when Alice is having a discussion with one of the queens, and the queen says, you know, something is both true and untrue, and Alice says, no, that can't be true. That's impossible. And the queen says, you know, well, if you train your mind, you'll start believing in impossible things. I can believe 100 impossible things before breakfast, etc. So